Okay, I call this meeting of the Waunakee Community School District Board to order at 6 p.m. And first thing is a roll call. All of our all the board members are present. One just stepped out of the room and he stepped back in. And so the first item then would be public comments, and we do have several for tonight. I would note that these are on a topic that is on next week's agenda, not today's agenda, but the people who submitted it asked that they be read today. The first is from Jim and Jenny Walsh. Dear Mr. Gutenberg, Mr. May, and board members, we are excited to learn that the WIAA recently approved the ability for teams to have 15 out-of-season contact days. We understand that our girls basketball coaching staff has put together a detailed and approved contact day plan that follows safety guidelines and protocol. Please allow us to take advantage of these much-needed contact day open gym opportunities for our physical, mental, and social well-being. These opportunities provide structure, teamwork, physical and mental growth, camaraderie, and time away from screens and social isolation. This is something that our daughter Katie could really use to help her get organized and focused on school. Similar to the existing athletic programs that are utilizing the facility safely, i.e. strength and conditioning and middle school volleyball, you can count on us to follow and respect the health and safety guidelines. Please allow us to take advantage of these contact days. Please read this letter and open comments beginning of Monday's meeting. Thank you for your consideration. Jenny and Jim Ball. Next is from Jennifer Mute. I hope I didn't butcher the name. Dear school board members, we have 4 daughters in the Waunakee school system, 2 in high school, 1 in middle school, and 1 in elementary school. They are all actively engaging in virtual schooling, but as most kids are missing so many aspects of school. They are very active girls, usually involved in multiple activities and sports. We were excited to learn that the WIAA recently approved the ability for teams to have out-of-season contact days. In speaking with our parents and coaches, we understand that our girls basketball coaching staff has put together a detailed and approved contact day plan that follows safety guidelines and protocols. Please allow the girls to take advantage of these much needed contact day open gym opportunities for their physical, mental, and social well-being. These opportunities provide structure, teamwork, physical and mental growth, socialization, and time away from screens and social isolation that they are experiencing. There are currently Waunakee athletic programs that are using the gym, such as strength and conditioning and middle school volleyball, and have done so safely. The girls and families are committed to cooperating and following the health and safety guidelines put forth. Please allow the program to take advantage of these contact days and have the time in the gym with coaches and teammates. Thank you for your consideration, Rob and Jen Mute. Next is from Mike Bryan. Hi everyone. We were excited to learn that the WIAA recently approved the ability for teams to have 15 out-of-season contact days. We understand that our girls basketball coaching staff has put together a detailed and approved contact day plan that follows safety guidelines and protocol. Please allow us to take advantage of these much needed contact day open gym opportunities for our physical, mental, and social well-being. These opportunities provide structure, teamwork, physical and mental growth, camaraderie, and time away from screens and social isolation. Similar to the existing athletic programs that are utilizing facilities safely, i.e. strength and conditioning, middle school volleyball, you can count on us to follow and respect the health and safety guidelines. Please allow us to take advantage of these contact days. Thank you for your consideration. Mike and Gina Bryan, parents of Ava Bryant Jr. on the girls basketball team. Finally, Tara Swald, Board of Education and Administration team. I want to take a moment to thank the coaches, administration, and Board of Education for creating and approving a safe plan to practice and play golf this fall. The opportunity to represent my school and team for the WIAA golf season was an honor. My team and I were very grateful. We were led by an amazing senior class before they head off to college. It was a great experience. Being able to golf was great. However, being coached and a part of a team was the most impactful. With co-curricular activities being such a big part of my high school experience and looking forward to the upcoming basketball and soccer season, my parents and I were excited to learn that WIAA recently approved the ability for teams to have 15 out-of-season contact days. We understand that our girls' basketball coaching staff has put together a detailed and approved contact day plan that follows safety guidelines and protocol. Please allow us to take advantage of these much-needed contact day open gym opportunities for our physical, mental, and social well-being. These opportunities provide structure, teamwork, physical and mental growth, camaraderie, and time away from screens and social isolation. Similar to the existing athletic programs that are utilizing facilities safely, i.e. strength and conditioning, middle school volleyball, you can count on us to follow and respect the health and safety guidelines. Please allow us to take advantage of these contact days. Thank you for your consideration. Taylor Swove, along with my parents Jeff and Tara Swove. Those were all public comments. There's no one here in person. In which case, we will now move on to approval of the agenda and additions. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mark and then Joan. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. And on to our first item, consideration of school reopening decisions and recommendations from the Ad hoc Medical Advisory Committee. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dave. What I want to first direct the board's attention to is the packet in front of you. And we tried to just provide you with a few of the pertinent documents that we will be discussing this evening. The first of them being the decision-making approach that was approved at a previous board meeting. It shows kind of what our process will be for decision-making. On the back, you will see our key data dashboards, which was updated last week, and then some additional information we'll be providing for you this evening. The second item that I want to share with you is, as we start looking at our data, in order to put context to what those numbers actually mean, I've provided you with this document that just shows different models of different, I guess, like metric tables that are put out from groups like Harvard, DHS, and then different places around the country. They're all very similar deviations off of a similar theme as far as averages over a 7 or a 14-day period, and then extrapolated to a population such as 100,000 is a pretty common number. We've used some of the data of 7 and 14-day averages for the discussion pieces for tonight, but it at least gives you some idea what those numbers mean and kind of how they fall within a continuum. You also have a few documents which I'll ask Kurt to go over in just a few minutes. One of them is a document that looks like this. It just says district at the top. It's a one-page, 8.5 by 11 sheet. That one just talks really about our cases, our positive cases, close contacts, and students with symptoms. You've seen that document, or our medical advisory group has discussed that last week. That was updated as of today. And then also the large data sheet with the graphs on it. This is really the primary data sheet we utilize to extrapolate the items off that we put onto the dashboard as part of our decision-making framework. So we thought that just for ease of understanding and to see our entire data set, this was the opportunity to be able to show that. We were illustrating with the yellow highlighted areas some of the pieces that summarize our data that we're really focusing on this evening. And then per a discussion, I believe that took place after the medical advisory group, was a request that potentially we could just show them in a graphic form as well. So you see that at the very bottom. So those are the pieces that are in front of you this evening. As we walk through this, a few things that we'd like to, I think just to frame it up, what came out of the medical advisory group was really bringing forth the updated data this evening. One of the things as far as preparation for tonight is I had asked all the board members to watch the medical advisory committee so you could take away from it and understand exactly kind of the perspectives that that committee and some of our medical professionals in the community had shared. But from a data perspective, we said that we would then bring forth data as accurate as we could up to the date that we had here. From a perspective of our doctors and other medical professionals stating that we needed to continue to track our data, we wanted to bring you the most up-to-date information. As we walk through this, we're also going to talk about a few other things. We'll talk about our contact tracing needs. That was a conversation that was brought up by our committee as well. And as we review our district data, we can discuss what some of our experiences have been, particularly over the last 6 days, as we've had incidents that we've had to communicate out, and really what that impact has been on us and our ability to address those. And then we'll certainly take some time to walk through the data that I think can at least give you an indication of what's occurring within our broader Dane County area and in Waunakee. And then opening it up, obviously, to the board for questions, comment, and then consideration tonight of where we go with our 3rd and 4th grade students. And depending on kind of where that discussion goes, we can also talk about some other timeframes and how they may fit in to future planning. But to start with, I mean, Kurt, I think it might make sense to start off with the district data. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So Rebecca, if you can pull up yep, that one, and just blow it up so we can see it a little better. And Kurt, I'll let you take a few minutes to really talk about the updated information, and we can use this as an opportunity to also discuss some of our experiences over the last 6 days, school days, and also some of our needs and what we're seeing from a contact tracing perspective.
All right, thank you. The chart that Randy's referencing that is up on the screen, again, has it's divided into different groups or different areas that we're monitoring. So it's positive cases within our staff, positive cases within our students, close contacts within our staff, close contacts within our students, and then students who are presenting symptoms. We did add a couple of columns onto the far right, just indicating if we've had to close anything, activities or classes. To this point, we have not. Last week, there was a point in time where we thought we may need to, but as we continued through our contact tracing, we did not need to do that. Again, these are our moments in time when we take these. I can tell you for certain that since we shared this information with Randy, I've had some emails where these numbers are slightly different. A person is only counted one time on this. So they're either a person, for example, we have some people who will present symptoms, and then they may be deemed that they're a close contact or deemed that they're positive. So we only count them one time. We don't count them 3 times because there is that scenario where you can have symptoms. We then find out you were a close contact, and then ultimately a person could go get a test and be positive. So again, we only count people one time on this chart. I did have a question in regards to, a couple of things. One is virtual versus in-person. Obviously, if you're looking at intermediate, middle school, and high school numbers here, in general, you can assume that those are kids who are hybrid, who are virtual. But that isn't always the case. We have had some students at the high school and some staff who were actually in-person individuals who did test positive or are a close contact. At the elementary, it's about a 50-50 split between who's in person and who's a virtual in these numbers. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea, I think, of the hybrid versus the virtual piece.
Mark, do you had a question about that?
So just, this chart is cumulative, correct?
It is, and that's the next segue I was going to go into. So at the medical advisory, it was asked by someone, it might have been Dave, I think you might ask the question, how many people have cleared? So I did, just before I came in here, I did do a count. And again, this isn't the symptom piece. This is the close contacts and the positives. So for the close contacts and the positives, staff, we've had 6 of the 25 who have cleared. For the students, we have had 17 of the 17 of 73 who have cleared. So again, that's 6 of 25 staff and 17 of 73 students who have cleared from being a positive or a close contact.
I think one of the pieces that we talked about at the medical advisory group was just tracking these numbers, the impacts on tracking them, and what our needs were moving forward. And with regards to that, there were some comments. From our perspective, I mean, that's not a request we're asking for tonight. We're not asking for 4 contact tracers. We feel it's really dependent on really the incident in front of you. And that can mean we had the incident that we dealt with today was easily able to be handled with the staff that we had. But we've had other ones that have had, when you're into the 20s, as far as contact tracing, or if things parceled together and happened on the same day as opposed to separate days, that's where you start to get into some of the impacts. And I know there was a question about being able to model, well, how many do you need per? Each one of these situations is still very unique in and of itself, and we are trying to take them at a piece, at a managed pace to try to see what kind of some of our trend lines. But I think from our perspective administratively, what we would be looking at from a contact tracing piece, we do have interviews this week for the one that you've approved previously. And I think we would just like the latitude to be able to add as necessary, as opposed to just say blanketly that we're hiring 4, which we think is more than what we need at this point. It would not be probably the investment in the right place at the right time today. Would that be, how would you kind of continue? You work very closely with that, Kurt, so I want to give you a moment to speak to that.
Yeah, the time it takes to do, I refer to them as events. The time it takes to contact trace through an event is really dependent upon the scope of what you're looking at, how quickly we are able to get in contact with staff, how quickly we're able to get in contact with parents to do that. As Randy said, today we had one, it actually started over the weekend, but we were able to resolve that very quickly. Didn't take a lot of time. It was a couple of phone calls and then a few follow-ups from our nurses. I made one call to a parent today, and we were able to quickly work through that and resolve it. Sometimes it takes longer because parents don't always return your calls right away when you reach out to them. So it really is dependent upon what you have going on at any one moment in time.
Randy, and if you're going to do this later, please
Yep.
let me know. But I have a couple questions on how we're handling staff illness that are either being quarantined or if they're positive, do we have subs, how are we doing that? And then what happens to kids that have to quarantine? And maybe you're going to do that later?
I think this probably fits in as well to this time frame as any of them. We're going to hit in some of the other data in a minute, but if that's the question that's kind of popping up, what we can try to address that right away.
So maybe staff first. Do we have subs? Do we had to bring in subs?
I'm going to ask Brian. I know he's looked at that, and that's definitely been an emerging piece that we have, but we're gathering some data on, and we've had a few concerns with how we're filling those. We want to talk a little bit about that. So with your question, I'll let Brian kind of speak to some of the things that we're seeing and how we're addressing those COVID-related issues with staff.
I guess in answer to your question, John, we've had a combination of different types of absences. Some have required a substitute, in the K1, 2, and special ed world, and some of our staff have been able to continue working at home, delivering to students and not requiring a sub. But I would say that there is some concern right now with what's happening in terms of substitutes. We've had a staff member that's been absent for one of these related reasons for over a week. And we've had no substitutes that have picked up those at the high school level that have picked that up for that whole period of time, including today. We had one, just a single day middle school special ed absence, not COVID related. That one did not get picked up as well, and I'll come back to what that means. But even in that, again, has concern. Special ed can be challenging to fill for substitutes, has been traditionally. But when I say difficult, we currently have an active pool of substitutes of 138 individuals. It's as large as it's ever been. But within that, substitutes work in multiple districts. And so substitutes also identify days that they're available. And some substitutes choose to turn off the calling feature, so they don't get the last minute calls. They might only look in and log in to see. So for those special ed positions, depending on the day, they've gone out on a call to between 68 and 87 individuals on any given day. Varies, depending on how many subs are available, who's working that day, etc. So 68 to 87 individuals in our pool have not taken those. A little bit more concerning is that last week we had a sub opening at the elementary level in kindergarten, which is typically, elementary subs are typically our easiest positions to fill. And that one went out to 73 individuals. And it ended up that someone did pick it up for half a day, the PM part of the day, but no one took it for the morning half of the day. And so I am concerned because we have offered staff or offered substitutes multiple times to ask them if they're interested in working. We've offered to let them be inactive in our pool. The folks that remain have chosen to do so, but have also chosen to not take positions. Right now, we have, of that 138 individuals, we have 23 people that are taking sub positions. 14 of them are long-term. So I have concern.
That's a big concern.
That's what, and that's, again, it is a challenge because substitutes, by their very nature, tap in when they want to tap in, and they tune out when they want to tune out. And right now, the majority are tuning out.
So that's a piece that we are following up with them to say, we're feeling good about the number on our pool, but obviously we're not feeling good that they're not necessarily taking our jobs. So we're trying to re-tap into them and say, are they truly active within our pool? And then the second part is that we've talked about is Brian held a non-certified sub-training not too many weeks ago, and we're getting many of them not taking our jobs. So that's a piece that we're trying to track back and just see if there's something else that we can do, is there something that we're missing? Because we do have what we view as as a pool of people to draw from. They're just not coming forward as those jobs are available. So that's a piece that, as we were walking through things last week, absolutely came to the forefront of our dialogue.
And can I ask what happened to the AM kindergarten kids? Did a principal have to do it?
Yes, we had it was a combination of folks, but yes, covered in the bill. And that's what's happening in the special ed positions as well. Administrators are covering it.
Yep, I think Mr. Borowski was in special ed in the high school for a few days, and I'm just covering some of the pieces as an individual was out.
I think Mark had a question.
It was related basically to that. So
So-
going forward, I would imagine the short terms are really big, but the hardest deal, because as my understanding, if an in-class person wasn't available to go online, but if it's a day out kind of thing or a one-day deal, the logistics probably don't allow for that, as I'm guessing.
Do you mean like a morning of switch kids to, you know,
Right.
you were in person and now we don't have a sub and
Right.
we've actually talked about that quite a bit because it is, frankly, it's the buses, many of the buses are on the road before or in a time frame that we can't notify families enough
Right.
in advance to have them not have their student go to the bus stop or have them drop their student off. And so we're currently developing plans about how we can cover, well, the building administrators have already been doing that, contingency plans about how they will cover those last minute absences. And then we are also starting to talk about, at what point will we have to perhaps call afternoon sessions of parents and say,
Continuing in person, what happens to them?
I can let Amy probably take that one best, because we certainly have had that occur and working through that as we speak.
I brought up our process for it, so I could just share it right from here. So the teacher collaborates with the family to develop a learning plan. When developing the learning plan, the teacher and family will consider the health of the child, the family, adult support of remote learning, technology needs, and supplies or resources. The teacher may also need to coordinate an individual student supply pickup to support the learning plan. So then there's a couple of different options for the instructional delivery. So if it's a first grade teacher, there could be another first grade, if the student is a first grader, another first grade teacher who could record their lessons and provide those to the student. Or that student could join that class for their synchronous learning, they could join a virtual class. Or the teacher would plan alternate asynchronous learning that could replace their in-person learning, or could be kind of a combination. So our default was kind of to put the child into one of the remote teachers' classes. I had a principal call today and said, at what point do those classes get too large? Because at one building we have like now 27 first graders. And so I'm like, well, we remember in our plan we do have asynchronous learning as an option. So we were putting them into the remote class, but as we get more and more students a year, then it's kind of overloading the remote classes.
I was hoping we weren't overloading them. Have we had any kids who are in person want to switch to remote? Or
Yes.
the other way? Have we had any?
Well, we haven't allowed the other way. You can't opt into hybrid until the quarter.
Okay.
So, let me find that. So we have a massive spreadsheet. Since mid-August, we have 59 items on the spreadsheet. But Randy asked me to look just after the first day of school, so just after the 8th. And I think there were 7.
Total.
Yep. Who wanted to switch from hybrid to, because most of those changes were in August. You know, the people said, no, never mind, I'd like to go to it.
Yeah, we had the bulk of those when the different decision points were made, or when things happened with regards to the state. That's when the bulk of those shifted, and that's where we had to then shift to do that. But I had asked Amy to look from September 8th to this point in time, so that's your 7 number. Is that correct, Amy?
Yep, if we can hold up a second. I'm getting some comments that the live feed is down.
Live feed went down almost immediately, yes. I've been trying to fix it, but
Okay, so kind of we're not a public meeting, because that's been the way we've been doing that, by not having people here.
Why don't you just take a break for?
Well, why don't we take 10 minutes then, and just see if you can get it up or what we can do.
you bet.
right, so we will reconvene our meeting. Unfortunately, the live feed is down. Someone tried to use a duplicate key on it, so I think somebody was trying to hack into whatever part of our website that is. But basically, it's all being recorded, so as soon as the meeting's over, they'll be able to post the recording. So, back to where we were.
All right, so where we were, I think we were answering Joan's questions about students and staff. Did we adequately address both of those questions, Joan?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. So anything else to add about this document, Kurt?
No, I don't
Alright,
believe
very
so
good.
unless there are any questions about it.
All right, if we can put this one down then, Rebecca, and go back and go to this one with the, yes, all the way over. There you go. All right, that should, you know, everybody should have this in front of them, and if there's anything you want me to point to specifically, Kurt, we can do so. But this is generally our master list of all of our data that we've been tracking since September 15th. And the bottom piece is really the totals for the Waunakee area. So this is our census tract information. And Kurt and Annie spent some time this afternoon, once the data was available, to update it, to help understand some of the numbers, particularly off of the averages over 100,000 or per 100,000. It helps to kind of look at the other chart just to put a context as far as what you're looking at. So Kurt, why don't I just give you the floor for a few minutes to talk about what you have in front of us, the graphs you have on the bottom, and the highlighted areas, and kind of what we've done since we met with medical advisor.
So the three rows that are highlighted are also then the charts, or the charts down below, the line graphs down below. Those are kind of the three data markers that we are watching the most to see what type of change is happening. The straight line that is on each of those is the trend line calculated by Sheets, by Google Sheets. So it just gives you kind of a perspective as to how the trend line is going for each of those pieces of data. Since the last time the full board met, we now are able to calculate 14-day averages. And many of the metrics that are being used across this country do use a 14-day value of some type. So we do have that, and that would be the 14-day average of positive tests, as well as the burden rate, which is also calculated on a 14-day average per 100,000, which, as Randy mentioned, is the Harvard metric that is out there. So as you can see, if you look at those, we've been able to do a 14-day average since the 29th of September. And as you can see, in the 14-day average of positives, we started that period at 5.29. We've ended that period, which is today, at 6.0. And then the burden rate started at 18.61 and is now at 21.12. Something I did this evening that Dr. Ranum talked to me about after the medical advisory committee. He may have mentioned it during the medical advisory committee, but I can't recall if he did. I know we talked about it for a while after. He said, kind of look at your data in 7-day chunks. So I did that. The last 7 days, our census areas have had 61 positives the 7 days prior to that, which would have been September 22nd to September 28th, we had 23 positives. The very first chunk is only 6 days, and that's September 16th to September 21. That was at 41. So I thought that was a little interesting. Then I calculated percentages related to those values. If you look at the 14-day period between September 22nd to October 5th, we had 84 total. 61 of those have been in the last 7 days. That's 73%. So again, I don't know if you have any questions or you want.
The other piece that the ad hoc committee was tracking were things with regards to hospitalizations. I mean, those have increased as well over time. I mean, I think that that's been certainly a metric that's very important to the medical community. From a school perspective, it probably doesn't impact us on a day-to-day basis, other than the concern as far as how does anything that happens within a community then impact the broader community with regards to hospitalizations. So I think that's why they asked for that piece to be on there. But we didn't bring that forward to you other than to just articulate that. That was a piece that is out there as well that was discussed by them.
Jeff?
I guess when you look at the last 7 days, Kurt, was there like one major incident that brought those cases up?
I wouldn't know that because all I get is numbers. Is there an incident that happened in our school district that I can point to as far as positive cases?
Or what did, I guess, what do you, the positive cases you were talking about regarding those of the community?
That's reflective of our community.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. That's not
I'm
school
sorry.
specific.
Okay.
It's the 4 census areas that we're pulling the data from.
Okay.
Yes. And it's the makeup of our community.
So Kurt, if I'm reading this correctly, just about every category since the medical advisory committee met, every one of the metrics has actually increased to some degree, some significant, some marginally, but am I reading that correctly?
They've increased. When you use the word significant,
Well, for
I mean,
example,
there was an increase.
your daily percent positives is doubled, 18% more, if I'm reading it correctly. 35% to 17%.
I think the challenge
Those
with
are daily positive
So daily
tests. So
positive.
that's just based on the day's activity. So
Right.
it's like today, for example, when you say 35.71, of all the tests that were reported, 35.71 today were positive tests.
Compared to 17% on the 29.
But they're also built off, those are our local numbers, right?
Yes.
Correct.
So if you look right here, 47 tests, 7 positives, 14,
All right, 2810, right.
right, and you only had 28 and 10, so
So
you
the number of
have,
tests makes
so
a
the
difference.
percentage piece on that, because of some of the smaller N numbers, has a pretty big
Right,
gradient.
right.
Right. That's why we have not chosen to highlight that row, because there's significant variability
Okay,
based on the number of tests that are given on any day.
got it.
Right. I think that was one of the questions we posed to the committee, was kind of what's the most pressing number? That was a number that they kind of showed as percent positive because it showed kind of a degree of disease and also testing capacity. But for that rate, but for exactly what Kurt just illustrated, it makes it a little challenging when you have, the numbers are so fluctuant between every day and the percentages there. So that's why we've really tried to look at the 14-day trends versus a 7-day. We felt that those kind of created a little bit more stable picture.
Right.
And then we've really focused on what we've titled here the burden rate. I think that was a piece we've heard through some of the different work. And again, we put that out over a 14-day period per 100,000. And that kind of is what extrapolates into some of the other charts that have been utilized. And so that's a piece. But again, you can see the variability of that on a day-to-day basis. It is a 14-day average, but as you have 5s and 10s, and depending what's coming on or off of the 14 days, definitely has an impact. When that 16 comes off at some point, what will the impact be moving forward? And the same thing when some of the lower numbers come off. So there's some variability to that, but it at least gives you a snapshot in time of what's occurring, and you generally see, given the limited amount of data that we've had tracking since mid-September, at least what trend lines we've been able to develop locally.
Which, I'm assuming is why the Med Committee really requested time to look at 3 weeks worth of data before they actually give an opinion on this, the what is. Because from 1 week to the next, it's one shot, but it's an incomplete shot.
Right.
Is that kind of right?
I think that's true. I think when you go back to the medical advisory group, and we had spent quite a bit of time looking at the data prior to that meeting, and the comment was, well, the week prior was better numbers than what the current weeks were. I mean, I guess from our standpoint, they looked relatively similar. That was part of the question that I posed to the committee, was based off of it, just looking at cases per day. Certainly you see a little fluctuation this week, but it's trying to determine, I mean, to me the piece that is important is kind of how does that extrapolate out over our whole population? Because this is looking at, this isn't school data, this is community data.
Yep.
What we're finding within our district right now is the impacts that, and all the contact tracing pieces up until today have not been because of any sort of spread inside of our school. They've been things that have found their way in that then we've had to address, either somebody being positive, either a staff member or a student, and then the contact tracing pieces that are a result of that. But the community piece is important as we start to see how our work then entangles with it. So, and that's, I think, the piece that's very hard to project or model forward is I feel we've done a great job with the K-2 piece. And as we add more grade levels, my hope would be that that pattern would continue. But I don't have anything that says it absolutely will, but and we have to watch what's happening community-wise to see how it impacts it. And that's where I think the advisory committee was stating, wanting to make sure that this went in a way that was successful, so you didn't jeopardize what you already have going well. But I definitely see, I mean, as we've sat down and looked at contact tracing, ability for us to move things forward, I think we have the internal capacity to address 3rd and 4th grade. It's now the question of, is it the right time to bring them in, given kind of what the data is? And I think that's part of the discussion here tonight. And you have kind of the advice coming from the medical group, but they also had asked us to kind of look at more data, which is what we're bringing here this evening, to see if things are continuing within a trend or if they are stabilizing. And you do have a little bit of fluctuation within those numbers, as you pointed out with the percent positive. Yeah.
And I think if you look at that, under your 7-day average, you over the entire period, you've gone up like unit. When you look at the 14-day, you've gone over 1 unit. And I think also what the medical advisory committee was saying is that, you know, they're not going to make the decision for us.
Right.
We're going to make the decision. And I think, as it was pointed out, when you look at, you know, the average, you know, the positive case change per day, you know, that's going to fluctuate up and down. But, you know, it goes from 9 to 10 down to 1. You know, then it kind of hovers around that 1 to 2, and then one day you got a spike of 10 and drops down to 5, 15. You know, what we've done, and I think what the medical advisory committee has said, is they've looked at our process, they've looked at our controls. You know, at least what I'm hearing is they thought that they were in line with what we're doing. And, you know, obviously there's applause because university came in and things went out of whack, but if you look at what's happening at the university today, you know, the numbers are starting to, you know, come into line with their graphs and charts and so forth. So I think, and even though the numbers theoretically went out of whack, we still have K2 that are coming to school. We haven't shut that program down. And we put the resources into, to be successful in bringing this program back, or at least the 3-4. What I would suggest is that we give it a try.
I think no matter what we decide tonight, I think it's really important for the community to understand that all of us want our kids back here as soon as we can. If it's safe for them, safe for our staff, but also safe for the community. And as I listen to some of the dialogue on public radio and some of the pieces that sometimes are missed, is that, well, the kids, if they do get sick, it's a short-term sickness. And I certainly wouldn't want to minimize that risk or that the potential problems with that. But an even greater risk is what they're going to carry into the community, to our staff. And that's why I think the public needs to understand, no matter what we decide tonight, the numbers are one piece of it. Our capacity to deal with those shifting changes immediately, as we heard tonight with our sub-issues, I'm not saying that negates anything. The health issues, all of those things will have to factor in. And what we decide tonight, do we have the operational capacity as we consider adding the next group, and then eventually the next group. And so it's may not be as swift as some people would like, but we have a huge responsibility, not just to our students and staff, but to our community. And all of that has to be factored in, not just a part of this or just the desire to get back as quickly as possible.
Well, I guess,
Brian?
You know, and also something we talked about too is making it clear that this is, you know, it's not inked in, whatever we decide tonight. It's got to be penciled in. We talked about that in the committee. So even if we would decide to start planning for 3 or 4, if this continues to jump for the next 2 weeks, that our administration has the opportunity to say, no, we're not ready to move on. Doesn't mean we have to take out 4K to 2. We just shouldn't be putting people back 3, 4. And I'm glad to hear that the administration feels like we're ready to go, or not ready to go today, but has the capacity, internal capacity to be able to manage this. But the community needs to understand there still needs to be flexibility with this, and not, if whatever date is set, it's not set in stone. And it's that way around the country. I mean, every day we see another school going virtual for 2 days, a week. It's for them to evaluate. So, I'm still debating which side to go on, but, you know, again, I don't think we have enough data yet. But another 2 weeks, if we plan to go ahead, will give us some more solid numbers that we can read off of.
If I can speak to just timeline for a second, Brian, to your point. If the decision tonight was to move forward with 3-4, that's going to precipitate an immediate communication going out tomorrow. That would then yield parents needing to decide by Thursday, it's a quick turnaround, of whether they're in person or virtual. Because that then needs to be worked on from an HR perspective, and then the busing, because all the busing, even the K2 would have to get redone. So that's going to be the time frame into next week to get all of those pieces. And then the first day back would be the 19th for 3rd and 4th grade. What the medical advisory committee had done was stated if there was a positive vote in that vein this evening, that we would have a medical advisory committee at 6 o'clock next Monday, which is normally when we have our closed session for that meeting. It's our regular meeting. But we would have a medical advisory committee of which would then review the data for another week, and then that the piece in front of the board at the regular meeting then would be, are we comfortable with those numbers to move forward, or are we going to hold at that point? At least that was my interpretation of really what our discussion was coming out of medical advisory and the setting of that. Does that align with what you were thinking, Dave, as far as kind of how that was laid out?
Yes, I mean, the idea is that when I asked that question at the medical advisory, it was all about what are our various options. And I kind of liked how Dr. Anderson said, well, the best option would be if you could change on a day. And it's like, well, that sounds great, but no. But it seems like the tightest time frame we could change on is a week. And so the idea was, if we decided to vote yes now, we set up so that that medical team would come in another week and look again, just to make sure. Because I was surprised. 2 of the doctors said that, you know what, if you had asked us last week, we would have said, yeah, it's fine. And they would have sent their students. Then they said, this past week, no, and we wouldn't send our students. But then they both also said, we think the numbers are going to get better, though, because of what they've been seeing, but right now, they're horrible. So the question is, you know, unfortunately, you could pick a given day, as you were looking at the numbers up there, you could pick a different day and say it's horrible, and then 2 days later say it's fine. I mean, we know in 4 days, all those 1s and 2s on the positive case change per day are going to go away, which means that burden number is going to go up, even if we were getting 5s and 6s, which were our historical average. So the number on the bottom line is going to go up over the next 4 days, no matter what, practically what we do. And yet, maybe it really won't be that bad because the new numbers are actually back at the norm. That's the problem. You can pick any given day and get an answer, but you kind of have to look. That's why the 7 and 14 days are what everybody's kind of looking at. Mark?
So if we approve tonight, notice goes out tomorrow, and the parents will know that they're signing up for the hybrid, 3 and 4, hoping it's going to be the 19th, but understanding it might not be, based upon next Monday's meeting.
And we're going to have them commit by Thursday.
Right.
And there's a tight time frame, and there's a pretty hard commit period here.
Yep. Okay, but with that
Yep.
understanding, it's a movable number.
That's right.
So then next Monday, we could decide to postpone it if the numbers warrant it, if the advisory committee is emphatic about the unreasonableness to move forward. Would it be in the community's best interest then to say, okay, well, now we get into that 3 to 4 week period before we reevaluate again, based upon they were supposed to have 3 weeks of data. The next meeting, I believe, is November 5, and that becomes the next decision point. But if we're going to do that, I hear enough in the community. But when are my kids coming back? if we presented them the framework with a little bit more completeness, includes 712 that we had on the 21st, so that they can now kind of figure this out. Okay, if it's not going to be the 19th, this whole thing moves to the 5th, maybe then it's going to happen. Even the high school parents at least have a guess as to when their kids can be expected to get back in school, and I think that visual is something they should have. So I think that's something, after we decide what we're going to do tonight, is something that needs to be discussed. But a visual framework, as Brian said, in pencil, but at least something that can kind of guide how this train's moving out of the station, or when it moves out of the station.
So I'm really happy that we have our principals here. How prepared are our 3rd and 4th grade teachers to change platforms? Are their classrooms set up for social distancing? Is their stuff coordinated so that they can easily distribute and not infect, and all of that protocol? Are the protocols in place? I mean, how prepared are our teachers?
So if you think back to when we were originally starting the school year, it was a week and a half or so before the school year started that we were notified that the 3rd and 4th were not coming back. Prior to that time, staff had prepared for classrooms, so no classrooms have been maintained pretty much intact, so they are ready for the social distancing. Things have been put in storage that need to be put in storage. In terms of the curriculum, it would just be, once we know where our numbers come in for those who are going to remain virtual and those who are going to come in for hybrid, and the curriculum is all, it's being established and worked on each week by our PLCs across the district.
So are the 3rd and 4th teachers well aware of how you get the kids in, how to get the kids out, all of the protocols? They've kind of been up to date.
They've had those protocols since early September.
So
yeah,
you're not-
they would have those. I mean, it would be new to them, so obviously it'd be like anything else that's new. It's going to take, a little bit of work to get it going, but they.
So this week, I understand there's STAR testing going on, parent-teacher conferences going on. So how much planning, discretionary time does anybody have to kind of put it in place this week?
This will be a tough week, I'll be honest with you.
It's bad.
This is a tough week. Friday's off without school too, after the parent-teacher conferences, so they're off.
Oh,
Friday
they don't
afternoon.
have school Friday.
Yep.
Okay.
And so they have parent-teacher conferences in the morning, and then Friday afternoon is technically off. So.
And is STAR testing next week as well?
Yes, sir.
Oh, gosh. And that's all afternoon?
Well, if they're in person, they're doing it in the morning. If they're in their
Right, but 3rd and 4th.
Yeah,
3rd and
third
4th
grade, yeah.
are doing their regular teaching in the morning, and then they're doing STAR testing. So their ability in the next 2 weeks to change platforms is on the lower side. Okay.
So I guess just to follow up on that, they were ready before we started. Is it a matter of dusting it off and coming back, or is it replanning and reworking and all this other stuff?
The procedures are there, it's just a matter of just implementing.
So the curriculum, I'm assuming, is there because they were planning for both before school started, because that's the direction. So we put these, hurdles in there, we start testing and so forth, but they should be, I'm assuming they should be able to dust it off and move forward.
They've had those policies and procedures. I think.
So it's not like
Correct. This won't be new for them. It'll be pulling it out and looking at it, which they probably haven't looked at a lot since they've been embedded in virtual. Part of the and Randy mentioned this quick turnaround with the tomorrow, perhaps, communication with the Thursday, hopeful response. Now, it'll be interesting to see how many families might perhaps change. I mean, we have right now what we had back in September as our hybrid students in 3rd and 4th grade. It'll be interesting to see if that stays or if that changes. And if there are significant changes, then we're talking about a lot of work to redo class lists, and then teachers that will not necessarily be teaching the same students they've been with for the last 3 weeks, but they will be with, you know, so there'll be a few things that take care of. Policies and procedures, they have those.
Policies, procedures, curriculum,
Yeah.
that's all in place. Sounds like what you're looking at is more administrative.
Class placement would be a thing.
Placement.
Once we know what they decide as families, then we'll have to reevaluate.
Yeah, placement plus.
Well, I don't think we should minimize the emotional ramifications where you went through look at K2, where some teachers who have identified with their team for years have been asked to move to a different team, maybe even a different building. And so there are some of those things too that I don't think we should minimize. So there's an impact. Jack, you got a wasp on your desk. But it's certainly something that I think we don't want to be blind to either. It's not an insignificant change for the 3-4 staff, given what might happen.
I would just say our curriculum is the same, but how the teacher delivers it, if she is in person versus remote, is different.
Absolutely.
So we're still, the curriculum is constant, but your delivery model needs to be adjusted. Now these teachers, we're planning to teach in person, like they will be able to make that shift, but they have been planning all of their lessons for the remote class. So it is a difference in how they deliver their instruction.
Yeah, I think an important concept too that we have to think about too, which is just, I can't believe I didn't think about it, but switching students from their teachers that they've been with.
Absolutely,
That's going to upset students, that's going to upset some parents. If they really, whether it be virtual or in person, if they connect with that teacher and all of a sudden mid-quarter they switch, that could be an issue.
So that needs to be clear in the communication that this may happen. And I'm sure you guys will do that, because they need to know up front, and then they need to make the decision based upon what they know or don't know.
That's gonna happen anytime.
Sure.
Like that's,
Yeah.
do that this month, do it 2 months, it's gonna happen.
You know, when you start flipping between the models, at this level, you're gonna have fluctuation of that. That's inevitable.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that
It is.
to the public that could happen and could expect it.
And that will be part of our communication out, that is the potential to occur in some areas.
So basically, on the agenda, our first question was about, do we start the process of opening 3 through 4 right now? Did you have a comment?
Sure, no, and this hasn't come up yet, and I just wanted to share it because I'm sure people are, well, no one's watching now, but they'll watch it later. So, I'm glad that we have a couple principals here to talk about it so that it can be said that, so I have obviously a little bit of perspective with kids going into school right now. I have a first grader who is kind of, I will tell the world, had a little bit of anxiety about going back to school this year. So I'd say he had a very emotional and negative reaction when I got sick this summer. He was very scared of what would happen. And he had some thoughts as to how exactly, how our kid's going to be dealing with this going back into school, because it's something they don't know about or haven't experienced yet. And I don't want to take any credit for how well he's doing. My wife really deserves that credit. And then beyond that, how well my son is doing now in school is entirely due to the staff, how well they're handling everything. I mean, this kid, if I gave him a 6 foot long stick, he'd carry it around and pointed at people to make sure they were keeping distance. because he's that careful, but he has gone from being scared to go to school to being happy to be going to school. And he says it's because of his teachers, and it's because of the people at the building. So however we move forward, I think the staff, and I'm only talking about a couple of teachers at Arboretum, but I'm sure they're doing the same everywhere. They need to know, and they need to hear from us that we know how hard they're working and that they're making this work. And that they can make it work for however we proceed, and I have a lot of faith in them that they will, because I've been incredibly impressed with how they've handled at least one emotionally anxious kid about going back to school right now. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. They're hearing a lot of negatives all the time about how things are going, that our staff really needs to know that they are doing a great job. So.
And I appreciate you saying that, Mike, and I know that's a piece that Brian and Kurt have been articulating. When we look at some of the issues, COVID-related issues we've had over the last week, it's a lot of credit goes to our staff as far as how they've been able to contain that based on following the practices that have been in place. And then just how they've worked with everybody as we've kind of worked through it. And to say that there was anxiety about that, absolutely. Can't deny that. But I give them 100% credit for being able to put in place and make the things as positive of an experience that we've had thus far. That credit goes to the folks who are working with our kids in our buildings every single day.
So, if there's no other comments, I mean, basically, our item to consider is, do we bring back grades 3 and 4 on the concept of October 19th, they would come back. The next 2 weeks would be the transitional period for admin, teachers, and facilities. Understanding also, though, on October 12th, there is another medical committee meeting, and there is another meeting at the board, and there could be another motion. Whether that's, we say no today, and then we decide next Monday to say yes, or we decide yes today, and things just get worse in Dane County. So all those options are on the table.
Dave, I guess I'm not even comfortable bringing 3-4 back, but I'm most uncomfortable with October 19th. It just seems, with all that's going on in the schools, and we have a short week, and we have a new survey going out, and then they get, it just seems like, to be fair to the staff, for them to do the job they want to do, to change platforms, it just seems too tight a timeline. But I'm not really in favor of bringing them back yet with the numbers that are on the board, so I don't know how other people feel about that timeline.
Just take a vote on it.
Well, someone would have to make a motion.
I make a motion that we bring 3-4 back on October 19th with the caveat that we review on the 12th, review the data on the 12th.
That was from Mike. So we have a motion on the floor of starting the 2-week timeline to bring them back on the 19th with the caveat of the 12th would be another review. And we have it seconded. So that now opens it up for discussion.
I know we threw out the idea that we weren't going to use the quarter as a timeline, but where are we on our calendar if we, when does the quarter end?
The quarter ends on
November
4th of November.
Okay.
First quarter.
I guess knowing that, we threw it out, but I guess I also look at the turnaround time, the expectations, the rising numbers that are going up. I would hate to have the K through 2nd be in jeopardy if the numbers go up too much and we have to close more. So I guess I'm waiting for more time before we start looking at 3rd and 4th.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I agree. When you hear the the availability or the inavailability of subs. You know, if we have cases, if our teachers start getting sick or need quarantine and we have more, I mean, the principals can't cover multiple rooms. Those kids, what do we do with those kids?
I guess the question I would throw out is, when is it safe to
I don't know if it
bring our
is.
kids home? And I guess if this motion fails, what I would do is make a motion that we table this till January, because, you know, we can't continue riding this, we're gonna do it, we're not gonna do it, yes, oh geez, something's changed. You know, we had great numbers last week, and now we've got bad numbers. You know, it's a roller coaster.
It is.
And I don't think these parents can continue supporting that. So we have to make a decision on, you know, are we gonna bring these kids back? And if we're not, then let's table it and, you know, not waste a lot of time.
Okay.
The current motion is still for October 19th. Yes, Mark?
And with all that said, I don't see we're in a position to lose anything by voting in the affirmative. If things are worse a week from now, we have the ability to put the brake on. And so tonight, I think it allows an opportunity to allow more kids to have the experience that Mike's son is having, my own grandson is having. He's happier this year than he's ever been with school because and I have to attribute it to being in the AM class. And if it looks like operationally, we're in a position that our administration feels we can go forward, or we wouldn't be having the discussion. Randy's been very honest with us about what they can or can't do. And I don't hear we shouldn't move forward coming from our administration. If they believe we're operationally okay to go ahead, I think tonight we can make the vote. I do think there's concern about disregarding our medical advisory committee, and that's why I think next week what they say needs to be listened to. I know they don't want to be the deciding factor. We'll have to follow up with what they tell us. But I do think that next week they will have 2 weeks more of data from the last time they were here. And it gives us the operations to move forward. And if conditions don't warrant it, we put on the brake. It's sort of a win-win tonight, I think.
Mike?
I guess the one thing I want to piggyback on that is that I keep beating around the bush, and I referenced this or was implicit in saying it before and what's going on in school, but I think our schools are safe and that our staff gets the credit for that.
Yeah.
We don't have any evidence of kids getting sick in school right now, and yes, that's because we have fewer kids in school. We don't have any evidence that they're getting sick there. We didn't have any evidence that the people down at UW were getting sick from being in class there. They're getting sick because they're going out and doing other things. And while we don't have kids that are going out to Wando's Saturday night, we do have kids that are going to Wisconsin Dells and playing sports or playing soccer up in lacrosse, and we have families that are having birthday parties and are singing karaoke together. That was all over Facebook. I mean, these are parents that want the kids back in school, and they're sometimes not doing the things necessary to make sure it happens. So I think the safest place for kids in our school district are in our buildings, because we have risk mitigation that we have in place. And I trust our staff and our administration to do it. I trust the community less than I trust what the district's doing at times. So I agree with you. I just think we need to keep that message, and it's one that Dave, you were bringing up months ago, is to, if we want kids to go back, we've got to get in line and do what's safe outside of what we are controlling. So I just hope that people are taking the message that if they do want these numbers to go down, they've got to get right and wear their masks all the time. They need to not do things that are not essential if we want these essential things to get back sooner rather than later.
Brian?
One thing, you know, I knew about the parent-teacher conferences. How much is the testing next week really going to take the time of teachers? in order to get ready for the 19th.
Virtual teachers at third, fourth grade, they have to set up their, about, there's 4 kids, 3 or 4 kids, they're setting up to meet with them, so for a class of 20, it take 5 extra hours. Just to get it to them for the start test.
So they bring them in small groups
Yep, virtual small
in
groups.
the afternoon. So instead of planning time, they're monitoring kids taking these tests, like 1 hour, 2 hours in the afternoon, 3 hours.
It would be instead of their small group, they have small group instruction time in the afternoon, so
Right.
instead of
Right.
that, it would be administering the test.
So I think some of this is just really bad timing, to have parent-teacher conference and start testing and then trying to start the next Monday. I mean, I agree. I think that's, even though they've got some systems in place, we still don't know who would be coming in, who wouldn't be coming in. I don't have a problem moving forward with 3, 4. I would like to see us push it back to the 26th to make sure we're not putting any more into capacity problem issues with our staff, because it just falls around a bad time, bad week and a half to get ready. Totally, I mean, we can plan all we want, but when you say go, there's still stuff to do.
They got a fall break, right?
That's the week of the 22nd,
So
23rd.
that they're gonna be here working and can do prep, or?
Actually, there's
Like,
no
if you did
one's-
that, Brian, they'd be losing 3 days of class, because they're not in school Thursday or Friday that next week.
Which week?
So what you have right now is you don't have school this Friday. Next week's a full week. The week of the 19th is actually a short week. There's no school Thursday and Friday.
So maybe starting that following Monday would make more sense and give them some time to.
The 26th, you're saying?
Yeah, if you move it to the 26th, I mean, I guess to that point, your impact instructional is 2 days, because Wednesday's a different day. So, because you do have the fall break that week.
Staff aren't reporting though during the fall. Staff don't report during that fall.
No, staff don't report during that week.
So really, when you talk about the preparation time for getting ready, you lost more time than you would the week before.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's-
I guess my view on this is, no matter what day we pick to say we're starting our 2-week transition, you're gonna run into something. That's a guarantee. The first couple days are basically gonna be parents giving us an answer.
If you look at, if I can just interject for a second, kind of to the point of the 19th versus the 26th. The 26th, yes, you have some days that are non-contact days, but it does give you a little bit more time to kind of put everything in place. And without giving up an entire week of what would be an instruction. It's not a full another week. Granted, you have some days that are off, but it gives you a little bit more of a buffer. So from my perspective, there's at least instructional sense to look at that from the respect of where staff are and looking at that. It's really not pushing it. It pushes it out on a calendar of an additional week, but from an instructional loss, it's not that big.
Is someone
so do I have
making the
to change my
suggestion
motion?
to
No, you
amend
don't
it
have
to the
to. Unless you
26th?
want to. It needs to be amended.
Is
If
that an
someone wants to-
amendment?
Someone would have to make an amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll amend, was it Jack? Motion just to push it back to the 26th, start
So-
date on the 26th.
Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
So the amendment is to change the date from the 19th to the 26th. It's been made and seconded. So right now, we're just discussing, should we do the 19th or the 26th? Then we'll vote on just the date, then we'll vote on whatever that final motion is. So right now, just the idea of the 19th or the 26th.
I would call the question.
You call the question on the amendment.
We haven't discussed it.
I think we should do it by name, since it might be very divided.
Do we have to second the call to question?
It was, yes, there has to be a second for the call to question.
Second.
There's a second. That's not debatable, though. So, for calling the question, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So the question is called. So again, we're only voting on changing the date to the 26th. How about, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So there was one nay. Okay, now we're back to the main motion, which is now for opening 3rd and 4th grade on the 26th of October, still understanding that there is a medical review and a board meeting on the 12th.
Can I just interject for a second? So what that would mean if that were to be voted upon is that we would still send out our information. We would still get information out to parents starting tomorrow in preparation for all the work that needs to go into this transition. We would still review this at a medical advisory meeting next week on the 12th. And there would be a consideration at the board meeting on the 12th with regards to stay or to change.
Stop.
And then if it moved forward on the 12th, the first day of 3rd and 4th grade would be the 26th of October.
Can we can we push the medical ad hoc meeting back to the 19th?
No,
The week
well,
before?
Well, we have it scheduled for the 12th with
I
all the
know.
participants set up to be
why would
there.
we do that?
So we have the most current data.
Although that also gives us the shortest time frame to make a change. I mean, it goes,
Well,
if we have the meeting on the 12th and things are looking dicey or not as clear as they would like, we could still set a meeting for
That's
the
fine.
19th.
That's fine.
And here's the other reality, if, that's the only option on the table, but then moving this back to the 26th, the med group was gonna meet on November 5th. We're gonna have less than a week of data on the impact of bringing kids back. And so whatever they come up with, I would suggest we may wanna consider
Moving the
moving
5th
them down
back.
the line as well, so that we're able to make the next decision
Right.
in a reasonable way.
And we'll definitely look at that depending on where we end up after the 12th,
Yep.
for sure.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
I guess the only thing I want to bring up is, because again, we haven't talked about it at all, we're not talking about anybody above 4th grade. And I'm aware that people are looking at this meeting and they may not have any kids at this grade, but every time we kick anything back another week,
The next
you're
group.
kicking everybody else back farther too. And there are parents who are basically waiting to see what happens today, to see whether or not they pull their kids out of school and homeschool them. So we need to keep those people in mind as we move forward. That's all.
And I agree with you.
I have been talking, Randy and I were talking earlier about the concept of creating a calendar that, as we talked about last meeting when the big plan came out about how we do this 2-week, rolling 2-week with the medical, us rolling 2 weeks, and setting up those extra board meetings. I think there's going to be a calendar put out after today's decision, and then that will then say where is the next possible decision point if things keep going. So there will be a calendar out with dates. Now, that doesn't mean it happens exactly that way, because right now, the one Randy currently has typed up just went from the 19th to the 26th, which moved, you're right, moved everybody else back over there.
What I've done, Mike, and just so everyone knows, is I kind of you have to start with one point in time. And depending on what that decision is, you then start rolling it forward. As you roll through fall, you also run into exactly what we have. You have weeks where you have days off, shortened weeks, and you get into November, you run into Thanksgiving, etc. So what I will do is update this, but I had just extrapolated everything forward, working around that, and trying to build in a schedule of what that means all the way 9 through 12. But that's all contingent upon kind of data staying here and not really any deviations from that. This is if everything was in a positive direction and we could make decisions moving forward. But I think that's part of when you were talking about a plan in pencil to be able to at least refer to. Once we have a decision here this evening, if this is where we're going, I will update this and I can present it at next week's meeting with kind of the updated piece given our starting point on the 26th, if that's what passed.
I think one of the things that's got to happen too is, assuming that things stay constant, if they stay constant, we're going to be bringing kids back to school. So I think, we've got to do some type of dual planning so that, teachers aren't just saying, okay, I got to change these different models and create all kinds of havoc and stress and so forth. I think the assumption is that kids will be back in school, and somehow, we have to, work through those.
Agreed.
I can tell you now, there is not another school district in Dane County talking about, even discussing a date or a time frame or anything about bringing 3rd or 4th grade back. We are the only one.
I think Cambridge did it a week ago I think they brought in 3rd and 4th or 3rd through 5th, starting last Monday, but that's the only ones that dialogue is happening on. So we're very much, I think Cambridge is in Dane County.
So, back to the original motion. Any further discussion? All right, I'll just do a quick show of hands. All those in favor?
26.
So universal, so unanimous vote to bring 3rd and 4th back on the 26th,
Okay.
with the understanding of the meeting on the 12th.
Okay.
So the second consideration question, based on the medical ad hoc committee, there was a question about having enough contact tracers. The board has already approved hiring 1 additional contact tracer, which they're already interviewing for. And what the concept is to bring up a consideration to allow the administration the flexibility to hire up to 2 additional contact tracers, which would be 3 total. Obviously, that would happen as we open up more classes. So if we
you're
go to
saying
3 and 4.
2 now and then 2 potential?
No,
1 now?
1 now, up to 3.
I think what we're looking for is, obviously, we are moving forward with wanting to hiring at least 1. We don't feel we need to jump to 4, but we would like the latitude that as we see things moving, that administratively we don't have to wait to come back through the formal processes here. So if the board can approve, I'm looking at you, Kurt, if we had an opportunity to go to a total of 3, I think then we can at least work through that between meetings. But I think that's, right now, we also don't want to utilize resources we don't need, and nor do we want to have staff that we don't have things that they can be actively working towards. So that's going to be a progression. That's going to be a piece of our experience as we move forward and as we enter different seasons of the year.
I move we make that,
Second.
thank you.
Or you finished.
So now it's open to discussion on that. The one thing I would say is the couple of schools you've seen that have closed for 1 or 2 days was about contact tracing. It was about the fact that they couldn't get a hold of people fast enough to keep at-risk students from coming back and making more at-risk students. So that's why this contact tracing is so important. Dane County's guideline is 48 hours. That doesn't work for us, because if they come back the next day, now you're contact tracing everybody they just had contact with. We have to get them in that first day. Yes?
Right, I just to piggyback off that, Dave, I had the experience with contact tracing in July, and what I can say is I took a test on a Friday, got a positive on a Sunday, and I didn't get called by a contact tracer for Dane County until Thursday, which made it almost useless because I had already contacted everyone. I had contact with myself anyway. But if I hadn't been responsible like that, and I'd been going to, debates and fundraisers, then that would have been out the window. So if we can have it as short as time as possible, that is another thing that's going to prevent having to lose.
And that's what our goal has been, is trying to get these done within the 24-hour next day timeframe.
Yep.
I think the piece we all have to realize is that there are going to be things that could cause blips within our screen where administratively I need to make a decision about slowing something down. A classroom may need to be shut down for a day. Something may need to happen in order for us to catch up if something occurs. And that could be substitute teachers. That could be because of contact tracing. That's part of the piece that we just have to be upfront about, that could happen and most likely will.
And if it does happen, I think our community needs to understand it's not a time to blame, particularly those who don't want us going back. I mean, I'm very comfortable with what your team has created for the protocols, and that's just following the protocol then. It may mean shutting down, that doesn't mean we made a mistake to bring more kids back. Things are going to happen, and we will respond to them to ensure the safety. So I think that's an important thing too, that it really speaks to the protocols and how well they're working, that we can do that versus that we don't do that.
And I think one thing that's going to be important about that is telling them why. I was kind of disappointed in 2 school districts. They said, we're going to shut the schools down for a couple days, but they didn't really, they said it was COVID related, but they wouldn't say why. Why not tell people? It was because we couldn't contact trace fast enough. It's not that there's a major medical issue, it's that we've got to get that done before we bring those students back to school. I'm sure we're going to be far more transparent as to why that happens when and if it does happen.
So do we have to have a vote on that?
Yes. Is there any other comments?
Motion and second?
There was
Can I clarify the motion?
the,
To hire, to allow the administration to hire up to 3 tracers as they see needed.
and I think there was a second for Brian. And so, any further discussion? Otherwise, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. And third is about an update and consideration of a vaccination clinic in Waunakee. This was, again, brought to the ad hoc committee. The concept is flu vaccination is going to be incredibly important to keep down false symptoms from overwhelming our contact tracing and our nursing, our health wellness checks. So the big thing they all agreed unanimously very quickly on is if we can provide vaccinations somehow, we should. So Randy's already been in contact with Dane County, and it looks like they're willing to provide us the vaccines. We would have to provide the staff in order to do it. I did speak with a couple members of the medical committee after the meeting. They're willing to help get volunteer nurses and stuff who would be fine with administering them. So the idea is we can provide it to people who are either uninsured or are on Badger Care. Randy and I also talked briefly before the meeting about maybe talking with one of the local companies that's providing vaccines about teaming up with them to be there also, so they could provide it to insured people and deal with the insurance as a way that anyone who comes gets the shot. And then they would get it depending on if they were insured or not. Not sure if that part will work, but we're going to try. So what we're basically looking for is approval from the board to say to go ahead with at least setting up the Dane County part of it to help us with.
I guess what I would just add is, one of the things I want to make sure is we can find some folks who can orchestrate this, because my team's full.
Yeah.
I mean, when I look at the people who can do this, my nurses, Kurt's to Brian, our team is completely engaged in what's going on. So if we can find some folks, and I think there may have been a few in our ad hoc meeting who would be willing to step forward to help orchestrate this, I do have a contact where we can go through. And what was shared with me, just like Dave said, they're not going to set up a clinic just for anybody here in Dane County, and they don't have staff at Public Health to staff it. But they have worked with other community organizations where they've provided the vaccine, as long as you had qualified people who could then administer it. So that would be a piece that I would want to find some folks to kind of spearhead that and kind of run with it. I think we could use our facility or something to be the place for that. It could be our clinic. We could kind of work through it. But I just want to make it clear, I don't feel our staff have the capacity right now to just take this on. I think it's a worthwhile piece, that if we could find some community folks to run with it, that would be awesome.
And I'm willing to be someone from the board or whatever I do have some contacts about trying to organize this. I definitely have at least 2 nurses already, but obviously we'll be needing a couple other volunteers there. So as long as we have a motion to approve going forward.
I guess the question, are we going to have hours on this? You know, I can't believe that this is just going to be open.
You'd have to pick like a day and a
You
schedule.
do like a weekend type deal. My sisters, that part of this came from one community member who contacted me, but also my sister's community school district did this in Connecticut. And what they did was they picked 2 Saturdays. And they just set a tent up outside the school, and they had nurses there and people there, and they just ran right through the line.
I mean, I think there's ways, I mean, we can work with our social workers to connect in with probably some of our families that may be in need. We can push it out through our parents, and I can get it out community-wide.
Well,
I
you might
think we get it
also
up on
want to contact
Facebook, we
either
get it
medical
out there, and
school.
let people know this is who our target audience is, and at least make it available. I think the pieces, these are available to folks who fall in the uninsured or badger care, but it requires you to travel. This would be at least a local option, so. From our perspective,
Does Walgreens provide this service already?
What's that?
Walgreens?
They do insurance.
They do insurance, I think. I don't know if they do uninsured or if they do.
They probably don't do uninsured, they
They might do
may
that.
do the Badger Care folks, but they wouldn't do the uninsured.
That's a piece we can look into, but I think the question that came out of medical advisory was, would there be any help from public health to this? There's a potential that they would provide the vaccines for us, which I think is a big piece. Because that was the part that the access to the vaccine itself was part of the limiting factor from the advisory committee as far as if
Again, I
you
think
could
it's
get it.
something that we can do to help protect the community.
Right.
And I know what Mike said, the more the community can do to protect itself from getting sick, the sooner we can move this whole enterprise down to the next step. So if we can work it out, I think that's great.
So
This
is there a
is
motion?
a community event, not just.
This would be, I would see it as a community event.
It's a community event, probably.
Coordinated by us.
Yeah,
And we could potentially work with some of our municipal partners.
WNC and stuff like
Yeah, we
that.
could work with the
WNC,
village, the
definitely.
town, and kind of see kind of how that might work and see if they want to partner on it.
So I move that we give Randy permission to move forward with this idea.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay,
Dave, why don't you and I just touch base offline on that?
we have one more item, is about the field house floor damage repair.
Yep, and I know that, can I have you go get John? He was in the back, or Annie, thank you. In your packet, you did see a memo from John Kramer. If I do need to call Steve, he is available via phone. Early September, we did have a sump pump overflow in one of our FIAD storage areas in the varsity gym. At that point, it flooded a significant part of our varsity gym at the high school, or our field house. John has been involved with 3 different groups: Stocker Sports Flooring, Schmitz Flooring, and then also with our insurance provider, who's come out and provided their assessment of the damage and what they will cover. Insurance has lined up their quote with the Stocker repair bid number, which is the $179,650. One of the conversations that John and I have had is with regards to how to move forward with fixing the floor. For some of you who've been on the board for a while, there was a point where we had to fix the other side of the floor when a water fountain overflowed about 10 years ago. Stocker Floors was part of that repair during that time. John reached out to EUA and to Volvo Brothers, not because they would have any part of this project, but we just wanted a third party that could give us a perspective of, do we move forward with the repair just of the damaged section, or should we consider replacing the entire floor? And as you can see within the memo, the comments that came back from our non-related parties, or folks that we partner on other items, they felt, given the nature of those type of floors, how they're installed, and their functionality moving forward, they would recommend repairing the whole thing or replacing the whole piece. It's about an 8-week process to do, so if we went that direction tonight, it would be complete by the beginning of December, because they can be on site relatively quickly. And from a dollars and cents standpoint, that leaves us a delta of $92,000 to pay to kind of do this in the direction that they would move it forward. Steve gave you an analysis of where he thinks the funds would come from. I spoke to him prior to the meeting. He felt the best place for it to come would be out of our short-term savings that we've actualized out of transportation, and that would that would cover the dollars that we have there. So from our perspective, that would be our recommendation, would be to replace the entire floor, given the input we received from different partners as we looked at it, and we would recommend that Stalker Floors be the entity that moves forward with that work. So John's here to answer any questions.
So that's complete finish, so new installment, new lines finished, total cost.
For the
Yes.
floor, yes.
Yes.
How does this differ from the previous water problem that we had? Because we didn't replace the whole floor.
We replaced part of the floor,
Right.
and I think, and that was a conversation that we had with that. When they replaced the floor, and I don't recall this part of the conversation, but Dr. Flores brought it up, that there was a piece with the vapor barrier piece. The other aspect that, and so they felt that that was a piece that potentially contributed towards how far the water spread during this period. So if you, the second part was then we would have potentially 3 ages of floor within there that we'd be trying to merge together. And they felt that that could potentially be problematic moving forward as far as trying to adjoin 3 different installs. John's really dug into this more than I have, but that's my high-level synopsis.
Yeah, that sounds great, Randy. I think the biggest part of it is that the remainder of the floor that's not repaired will retain its non-sealed vapor retarder and foam. So if there is water again, it tends to be a larger repair, larger damage.
Well, I'm guessing too, that the wood expands and shrinks, and so the newer wood would be doing that at a different level than the older floor, so that's the cohesiveness you're talking about between different, doing it piecemeal versus the entire thing, correct?
Yeah, and again, the remaining unfinished part is not sealed like it should have been, I guess, during the original installation. So they can match it up pretty well, but we would still have the 3 ages of floors. It would require, you know, you and I probably wouldn't be able to see it when we walk on the floor, but there would be the 3 different ages of floors and the non-uniform underlayment.
Didn't I see in here that the new floor would have some type of expansion gap somewhere to allow the wooden to expand? I thought I read that in one of these quotes or something like that. So I guess the bigger problem is the sump pump all right? So this doesn't happen again?
Yeah.
So some pumps are not included in the floor piece, but we're having the sump pumps work on. We'll also need the bleachers to be moved as well.
Going back to Jack's point, when we had the water issue 10 years ago, I believe it was a smaller part of the floor than what we have this time. At that point, we didn't look at replacing the whole thing. We did repair it. We did take the whole thing down and refinish the whole floor. That was required, but that was part of what John did some investigation on, is whether we should just do the repair here again, or if we should be looking at kind of the bigger piece. The Stalker Floors obviously was looking at replacing the whole thing as their recommendation, which is why we reached out to some people who aren't involved in this project that wouldn't be part of the bidding process, is to get their perspective.
Did you look on the maintenance spreadsheet to see when that floor was being scheduled to be replaced anyway?
50 years.
50 years from now?
From the installation plan.
Long time.
Assuming there's no water.
2 different floors. I went through 2 different wooden floor replacements in colleges and stuff like that, and yeah, if you start piecing it together, it's not it's when you have the time to replace it all, it's the best time to do it.
So we could have a motion for either full replacement or a motion for the repair.
A motion for a full replacement.
Second.
Okay, so now let's motion on the floor. Your comment.
Sure, no, I guess my question was, is there any consideration of other options for what we're putting in other than just the full-on replacement of the floor as is right now? Is there anything else that can be done in that space for things that can be changed other than just having a wood floor in the room? I mean, thinking of other places that have the floors they take out and they have concrete underneath, they can put something else in, use it for different sports other than just basketball. Is there anything at all like that we could do? I mean, if we're replacing now, now's the time to think about that. I don't know.
So you're thinking about making it the possibility of not just having a basketball floor, but having a floor that's some other purposing or multi-purpose?
Sure, I don't know anything about the cost of that whatsoever. This never went through facilities, it just came right here. But if this is the timing of it, that would be the time to consider anything like that anyway. So that's the only reason I don't.
It's a good point. I think when you start to look at the longevity, the length of time, and kind of the things that we do in there, the wood floor is probably your best option. I mean, that's what we looked at different options when we did the intermediate school. We put a wood floor in at that point, and we had looked at things like with a different type of floor at Prairie. And we felt that the wood floor was kind of a piece that met our needs the best and had the greatest longevity.
And Randy was correct with either option, you have a full sand and refinish either way.
So currently the motion on the floor is full replacement. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And motion passes for full replacement. Future agendas and meetings, actually, I guess we'll see you all Monday. I don't think there's anything else on that.
I think I'll just clarify, the medical ad hoc will go first at 6 o'clock, and then we will follow up at 7 o'clock with our regular meeting. I'll start off with closed session. I anticipate that to be short, and then we'll go forward.
Any further?
So,
Then I'll motion-
clarification, we're all not here for medical
There's,
advice.
if you would like to be, there's no reason you couldn't be.
Under the board policy, board members can attend any meeting or committee meeting and fully participate. But if they're not assigned to the committee, they can't vote. But
you
that
can
committee doesn't
absolutely-
have voting, so.
And we can have seating set up around the perimeter for people.
The presumption would be, I'm assuming all of you are going to be here at 6.
Yes. I will be absent for the whole meeting.
You will miss next week's meeting?
Yes.
Very well, thank you.
Are we adjourning the meeting?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
So Mike and then Jack, is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed will miss the Packer game. As it is, we already done.
Just like he was like,
He deleted his tweet fairly